Hey crew, it's Pitt, and we're back with some more Socrates. Today we are diving back into the works of Plato. We are in Plato's Republic, Book 7. This is the Dialogues of Socrates, and today is the cave, the allegory of the cave. You have probably heard of this part at least sometime. So we're going to read through it and see what it says. Now, I said, after this you should compare our nature in respect of education and lack of education to a condition such as the following. Behold men in an underground cave like dwelling with a long entrance facing towards the light along the side of the entire cave. They have been in this place from childhood with bonds both on their legs and on their necks so that they remain looking at only what is in front of them, being unable to turn their heads around because of the chain on the neck. Light comes to them from a fire burning at above and at a distance behind them, and higher up, between the fire and the prisoners, there is a path. And you can see a low built wall along the path, just like the screen which puppet makers place in front of themselves, over which they display their puppets. I see, he said. Besides this, you should also see men carrying a variety of objects past the wall, including statues of men and other animals made of wood and stone and all sorts of materials. Some of the object carriers are likely to be speaking, while others are silent. You are describing a strange image, he said, and strange prisoners. They are just like us, I said, for the first place. Do you not think that such people would have ever seen anything of themselves or one another, apart from the shadows cast by the fire onto the cave wall in front of them? How could they, he replied, if they were compelled to keep their heads motionless throughout life? What about the objects being carried? Is not the situation the same? Of course. Now, if they were able to converse with one another, do you not think they would name these things that they are seeing? Well, they must. What if the prison had an echo coming from the opposite wall, and whenever one of the passersby spoke, do you not think the men would believe the speaker to be anything other than the passing shadow? By Zeus, I do not, he said. Then such people would believe, I said, without reservation, that the truth is nothing but the shadows of artificial objects. They really must, he said. Now, consider what liberation from their bonds and cure of their ignorance would be like for them, if it happened naturally in the following way. Suppose one of them were released and suddenly compelled to stand up, crane his neck, and walk and look up towards the light. Would he not be pained by all of this, and on account of the brightness be unable to see the objects whose shadows he previously beheld? And if someone were to tell him that he beheld foolishness before, but now he sees more truly, since he is much closer to what is, and is turned towards things which partake of more being, what do you think he would say? Moreover, if they showed him each of the passing objects and forced him to answer the question, what is this? Do you not think he would be perplexed and would believe that what he saw before was truer than what he is now being shown? Very much so, he replied. And if he were compelled to look towards the light itself, would not his eyes be pained? Would he not turn away and flee to those things he really can see, and regard these as in fact clearer than what he is being shown? Just so, he replied. And if someone were to drag him forcibly from there, along the rough upward path, and not let him go until he had been dragged out into the light of the sun, would he not be distressed and upset by the process? And once he had come into the light, would not his eyes be flooded with its glare, and be unable to see even one of what are now called truths? No, they would not, he said, not immediately anyway. Yes, I think he would need to become accustomed to it if he were to ever behold the objects of the upper realm. At first, he would discern shadows very easily. After that, images of men and other objects in water, and then the actual objects. From these, he would proceed to view the heavenly bodies and the heaven itself by night, looking at the light of the stars and the moon more easily than the sun and the light of the sun by day. What else would he do? Then, I imagine, he would finally be able to behold the sun. Not its appearance in water or in an alien setting, but just by itself in its own place. He would see the sun as it is. This must be so, he said. And after this, he would then make deductions about it. What this is, that what provides the seasons and the years, presiding over everything in the visible realm, and in a way, the cause of everything they have been seeing. Obviously, he said, those are the steps he would take. What then? Remembering his first dwelling place and the wisdom there and his former fellow prisoners, would he not believe that he himself was blessed by the transformation and feel compassion for them? Very much so. And suppose they received certain honors and praises from one another, and there were privileges for whoever discerns the passing shadows most keenly, and is best at remembering which of them usually comes first or last, which are simultaneous, and on that basis is best able to predict what is going to happen next. Do you think he would have any desire for these prizes, or envy those who are honored by the prisoners and hold power over them? Or would he much prefer the fate described by Homer, and work as a serf for a man with no land and suffer anything at all, rather than hold their opinions and live as they do? I think it is just as you say. He would accept any fate rather than live as they do. Yes, and think about this. If such a person were to go back down and sit in the same seat, would it not his eyes become filled with darkness after this sudden return from the sunlight? Very much so. Now suppose he had to compete once more with those perpetual prisoners in recognizing these shadows. While his eyesight is still poor, before his eyes had adjusted, would it take some time to become adjusted to the dark, so that he would not become a figure of fun? Would they not say that he went up and came back down with his eyes ruined, and that it is not worth even trying to go upwards? And if they could somehow get their hands on and kill a person who was trying to free people and lead them upwards, would they not do just that? Definitely, he said. Then, dear Glaucon, you should connect this image in its entirety with what we were saying before. Compare the realm revealed by sight to the prison house, and the firelight within it to the power of our sun. And if you suggest that the upward journey in seeing the objects of the upper world is the ascent of the soul to the realm known by reason, you would not be misreading my intention, since that is what you wanted to hear. God knows whether it happens to be true, but in any case, this is how it all seems to me. When it comes to knowledge, the form of the good is seen at last, and is seen only through effort. Once seen, it is reckoned to be the actual cause of all that is beautiful and right in everything, bringing to birth light and the Lord of light in the visible realm, and providing truth and reason in the realm known by reason. Where is the Lord? Anyone who is to act intelligently, either in private or in public, must have had sight of this. I also hold the same views that you hold, he said, after my own fashion, anyway. Well, come on then, I said, and agree with me about something else. Do not be surprised that those who have attained these heights have no desire for involvement in human affairs. Their souls, rather, are constantly hastening to commune with the upper realm. For I presume that it is what is likely to happen if it really does accord with the image we described earlier. Yes, quite likely, he said. Yes, And do you think it would be any surprise, I asked, if someone who has returned from divine contemplations to human affairs disgraces himself badly and appears utterly ridiculous while his eyes are still dim? And if, before he has become accustomed to the prevailing darkness, he is compelled to argue, in courtrooms or elsewhere, about the shadows of justice, or the artificial objects which cast those shadows, and dispute about those matters as understood by people who have never seen justice itself? No, that would be no surprise at all, he replied. But if someone were endowed with reason, I said, he would recall that the confounding of the eyes is of two kinds and has two sources: a change from light to darkness and from darkness to light. And having realized that the same thing happens to the soul, he will not laugh boorishly when he sees a soul confused and unable to see clearly. Instead, he will inquire whether it has come from a brighter life and is darkened because it is not used to the gloom, or is it coming from utter darkness of ignorance into the brighter realm and is dazzled by the greater brilliance? So on this basis, he would regard the condition and the life of one soul as blessed, while he would feel compassion for the other. And if he wished to laugh at it, his laughter would be scornful, would be less scornful than it would for a soul descended from the light above. Yes, he said, what you're saying is very reasonable. Then I said, if this is all true, there is something we need to recognize about it. Education is not the sort of thing which some people profess it to be. They somehow claim that although knowledge is not present in the soul, they can put it there, as if they are putting sight into blind eyes. Yes, that is what they say. Yes, but the argument is now indicating that this capacity, present in the soul of each person, the instrument by which each learns, is like an eye which cannot turn to the light from the darkness unless the whole body turns. So this instrument must be turned, along with the entire soul, away from becoming, until it becomes capable of enduring the contemplation of what is. And the very brightest of what is, which we call the good. Is this so? Yes. Then, I said, there would be a particular skill dealing with this turning of the soul, which will turn it around in the most easy and effective manner. A skill which does not produce sight in the soul, but assumes that although sight is already present, it is not directed properly, or looking where it should, and sets about correcting this. Yes, so it seems. Now, the other excellences, which are said to belong to the soul, are really somewhat closer to excellence of the body, for they are not actually present at first, but are generated later through habit and practice. However, that excellence wherein we employ reason surely belongs most of all to something more divine, it seems, something whose power is never destroyed, but becomes either useful and beneficial or useless and harmful, depending on how the soul is turned. Or have you never noticed that those men who are said to be evil and yet wise, have you noticed the keen vision of their tiny soul and how sharply it discerns whatever it happens to turn to? For there is no problem with its sight, but it is forced into the service of evil, and consequently, the more keenly the soul sees, the more evil it accomplishes. Yes, certainly, he said. However, I said, if this part of one who possesses a nature of this kind is worked upon from earliest childhood, the relationships with becoming are cut away as if they were lead weights. These grow upon the soul through gluttony and similar pleasures and the refinements thereof, and turn the vision of the soul downwards. But once the soul is quit of them, it turns around to the realm of truth. And the same part of the same people behold that realm just as clearly as it beholds whatever is in front of it now. Quite likely, he said. What about this? Is it not also likely, said I, and must it not follow from what we said before, that neither the uneducated, with no experience of truth, nor those who are allowed to spend all their time in education, would ever be adequate custodians of the city? The one, because they do not have a single purpose in life, which they should aim at in all the actions they perform, in public or in private, and the other, because they will not willingly engage in action, believing that whilst still alive they are already dwelling on the far-off islands of the blessed. True, he said. Now, it is our task as founders to compel the best natures to attain the learning with which we said previously was the most important, to see the good and ascend that upward path. And once they have ascended and seen enough, we must not allow them to do what is permitted at present. What is that? They are allowed to remain there, with no desire to descend once more among those prisoners, or to partake of their endeavors or their honors, whether these are mundane or more serious. In that case, he said, shall we be doing them an injustice? Shall we make them live an inferior life when a better one is available to them? My friend, I said, you have just forgotten that the law is not concerned with how one particular class in the city may fare better than the others. Instead, it tries to bring this about in the city as a whole, creating harmony among the citizens by persuasion and compulsion, and making them share with one another any benefit that each of them is able to contribute to the community. And the law itself produces men like these in the city, not so that each may go in any direction as he pleases, but to use them to bind the city together. True, he said. I had forgotten this. Then I said, you must see, Glaucon, that we are not doing an injustice to philosophers in our midst, but we shall be making the just demands when we compel them to care for and protect the other citizens. We shall say that when people like you arise in other cities, it is reasonable that they do not share in the labors of those cities. And this is justified there because such people develop of their own accord, through no attention on the part of that civic arrangement. And it is only fair that whatever develops of its own accord owes its nurture to no one, and should feel no urge to pay for that nurture. But you have been bred by us like kings and rulers of the hive, both for your own sakes and for the rest of the city. Having been better and more perfectly educated than them, you are more capable of participating in both realms. Therefore you must each play your part and go down to where the others dwell together, and become accustomed with them to the dark shadows. For once you are used to the darkness, you will see 1,000 times better than the people there. And you will know what each of the images is, and what it is an image of, because you have seen the truth about things beautiful, just, and good. Accordingly, the city will be governed by us, and you in a wakeful state, and not in a dream, as most cities are governed today by men who fight one another over shadows and battle for public office as if that was the greatest good. But surely the truth is that the city in which those who are going to rule have the least desire to do so must be the best governed city, and the one most free from strife. And if it gets the opposite sort of rulers, it must be ruled in the opposite manner. Yes, certainly, he said. Now, will our charges be unmoved when they hear this? And will they be reluctant to join in the work of the city when it is their turn, and then live together most of the time in the pure realm? Impossible, he replied. We are laying just injunctions upon just men. However, each of them will approach public office very much as a necessity, in contrast to those who now rule each city. So on this basis, my friend, if you can find a better life than ruling, for those who are going to rule, a well-governed city becomes a possibility for you. For only there will the truly wealthy be the rulers. Not wealthy not in gold, but in the wealth which a blessed man needs, a good and reasonable life. However, if beggars, starved of goods of their own, enter public affairs thinking therein they may seize the good, then it is an impossibility. For public office then becomes something to fight over, and a domestic and internal battle like this destroys the disputants and the rest of the city. Very true, he said. Now, I said, other than the life of true philosophy, can you think of any life that despises political office? By Zeus, I cannot. Well, in that case, those who are not lovers of public office must take it on. Otherwise, the competing lovers will fight over it. How could it be otherwise? Now, are there any others whom you would compel to act as guardians of the city? Others who would manage it better than those who are wisest about these matters, or who have other honors and a better life than politics? There are no others, he replied. Then would you like to go on to consider the manner in which people like this will arise in our city, and how we shall lead them to the light, just as certain people are said to have ascended from Hades to the gods? How could I refuse, he said. Well, this, it seems, would not be the mere flipping over of an oyster shell, but a process of turning the soul around from a day, which is more like night, to the true day. The ascent to what is, an ascent which we may truly call philosophy. Yes, certainly. Then, is it necessary to consider which branch of learning possesses a power like this? It is necessary. Now, Glaucon, what subject would draw the soul from becoming towards what is? And something else occurs to me as I say this. Did we not state that these guardians must be practiced in war when they are young? Yes, we said that. So the subject we are looking for must also have this characteristic as well as the other. Well, what characteristic? It must not be useless to military men. It must not, if that is actually possible. In the earlier account, they were educated by us in gymnastics and in music. They were. Gymnastics is presumably concerned with what comes into being and passes away, for it presides over the development and decline of the body. So it appears. Then, this would not be the subject we're looking for. It would not. So in that case, is it music in the sense that we described it earlier? But that was the counterpart of gymnastics, he said. If you recall, it educated the guardians through habit, imparting gracefulness through its harmony and orderliness through its rhythm, without imparting knowledge. And it also contained habits akin to these in its words, both in the mythical stories and in the truer versions. However, music does not include a branch of learning that leads towards the thing you are looking for now. A most exact reminder, I said, for the music actually contains nothing of that sort. But, my blessed Glaucon, what kind of subject would this be? Indeed, all the skills seemed somehow to be mechanical. Yes, they must be, and yet what other subject is left apart from music, gymnastics, and the various skills? Come on, I said, if we cannot come up with anything besides these, let us select something applicable to them all. Like what? Like this. What they have in common. That which all skills, thoughts, and knowledge refer to, and which is also the first thing everyone must learn. What is it? The ordinary process of distinguishing 1, 2, and 3. In short, arithmetic and calculation. Is it not the case that all skill and knowledge must involve recourse to these? Very much so, he replied. Military skill too? It certainly must. In that case, Palmades in the tragedies reportedly shows up Agamemnon as an utterly ridiculous general. Or, have you not noticed that he claims to have discovered number and arranged the ranks of the army at Troy and counted the ships and everything else as though they had not been counted before? And apparently, Agamemnon did not know how many feet he had, since he did not know how to count. What sort of general do you think he was? A strange one, he replied, if this is true. So, I said, should we propose that the ability to calculate and count is a necessary branch of learning for a military man? It is the most necessary of all, he said. If he is going to have any understanding whatsoever of arranging armies, and more importantly, if he is even to be human. Now, do you notice what I notice about this subject? What is that? It is quite likely to be one of the subjects we are seeking, which leads us towards reason. However, no one uses it correctly. That is, as a subject, which can draw one comprehensively towards being. How do you mean? He said. Well, I shall try to set out my opinion. Look at this with me and agree or disagree so that we may see more clearly if my suspicion is correct. For I am distinguishing for myself between what leads and what does not lead in the direction we spoke of. Give an example, he said. Take this example. Observe, if you can, that in the case of sense perceptions, there are some which do not call upon reason to investigate them, since they are adequately judged by the senses. Others, however, completely depend upon reason to investigate them, since the senses furnish nothing trustworthy. You are obviously referring to distant phenomena and shadow drawing. You have not really got my meaning, I said. Then what do you mean? Those which do not call upon reason are those which do not extend into the opposite sensation at the same time. However, in the case of those which do extend, I suggest that they call upon reason whenever the sense impression reveals something, no more than its opposite, regardless of whether it impinges upon us from near or far. My meaning will be clearer from this example. We would say that these are three fingers, the smallest, the second, and the middle. Certainly, he said. Assume I am describing them as seen from close up. Now, there is a question you must consider in relation to them. What is it? Well, each of them, in the same way, appears to be a finger. And in this respect, there is no difference whether it is seen in the middle or at either extreme, whether it is white or black, or whether it is fat or thin, or anything of that sort. For in all these cases, the soul of most people is not compelled to put a question to reason as to what precisely a finger is. For at no stage does sight indicate to the soul that the finger is the opposite of a finger at the same time. No, it does not, he said. Therefore, a case such as this would be unlikely to call upon or awaken reason. Unlikely. What about this? Does sight see their largeness or smallness adequately? And does it make no difference to sight whether one of them lies in the middle or on either side? Does the same apply to thickness and thinness, and hardness and softness in the case of touch? And do all the other senses reveal things like this without any deficiency? Or does each of them behave in the following manner? The sense which extends to hard must also extend to soft, and it proclaims to the soul that the same thing is being perceived as both hard and soft. Just so, he replied. Must not the soul, I said, for its part, be perplexed in such circumstances as to what precisely the hard that the particular sense is indicating actually is, since it also says that the same thing is soft? And if the sense of light and heavy indicates that heavy is light and light is heavy, must not the soul be perplexed as to what is heavy and what is light? Yes, indeed, he replied. These messages to the soul are strange and require further investigation. So I said, is it likely that in these situations the soul first calls upon calculation and reason and tries to investigate whether each of the proclamations is two or one? Yes. What else could it do? If it turns out that it is two, would not each of the two appear to be both different and one? Yes. So if each is one and both are two, soul will recognize the two as separate. For if they were not separate, it would not have recognized two, but only one. Correct. And we say sight, too, has seen large and small. Not separately, however, but in combination. Is this so? Yes. But for the sake of clarity in this, reason, in contrast to sight, is compelled to view large and small, not mixed together, but separately. True. Hence, the first thing that occurs to us is to ask what precisely large and small actually are. Is this not so? Entirely so. And on this basis, of course, we said that there was a realm known by reason and also a realm known by sight. You are perfectly right. Well, this is what I was trying to explain earlier, that there are some things that call upon thought and others that do not. Now, I define those things that impinge upon a sense at the same time as their own opposites, as provoking reason, while those which do not do this do not awaken reason. Very well, I understand now, and I think this is right. Well then, to which realm do you think number and the one belong? I cannot decide, he replied. But you can work it out from what was said before. If the one is seen adequately just by itself or apprehended by some other sense, it would be like the finger we referred to. It would not draw people towards being. However, if the one is always seen with something which is opposite to it, so that what is presented is no more one than its opposite, discrimination would then be required. And in that situation, the soul, activating the intelligence within herself, would have to be perplexed and search and ask, what precisely is the one itself? And accordingly, getting knowledge of the one would be among the branches of learning that lead the soul and turn her around towards the contemplation of what is. And indeed, he said, this applies in no less measure for seeing it, for we see the same thing both as one and as an unlimited multiplicity at the same time. Since this is what happens in the case of the one, will not the same thing happen with all number? It must. And indeed, calculation and arithmetic are entirely concerned with number. Very much so. Yes, and these appear to lead towards truth. Yes, to an enormous extent. So, apparently, these would be among the subjects we are seeking, for a military man must learn them in order to arrange the army in ranks, and a philosopher has to learn them too, because he must lay hold of being, and rise out of becoming, otherwise he will never be able to calculate. This is the case, he replied. Now, our guardians turn out to be both a military man and a philosopher. Of course. In that case, Glaucon, it would be appropriate to establish this subject by law and persuade those who are going to participate in the most important affairs of the city to have recourse to calculation and take it up not as a personal matter, but until they attain the contemplation of the nature of the numbers by means of reason itself. They should not practice it for the sake of buying and selling, like merchants or retailers, but for the sake of war, and the ready turning of the soul herself away from becoming towards truth and being. That is beautifully expressed, he said. And indeed, I said, in the light of what is being said about the subject of calculation, I realize that it is nicely and entirely suited to our purpose, provided it is pursued for the sake of knowledge and not for shopkeeping. In what way, then, he asked. And the way we already described. It leads the soul powerfully upwards to some place and compels her to engage in dialectic in relation to the numbers themselves. It will not accept it at all if someone presents the soul with numbers associated with visible or tangible things and discusses them. For I presume you know that its skilled exponents are amused if anyone, in discussion, attempts to divide the one itself, and they will not accept this. If you divide it, they will multiply, being careful lest the one ever proves to be not one, but a multiplicity of parts. What you're saying is very true, he said. Glaucon, if someone were to ask them, wonderful men, what sort of numbers are you talking about, and which the one you are proposing? Each, in every case equal to each, not in the slightest bit different and having no parts within itself? What do you think their reply would be? I would think they would say that they are referring to those numbers which it is possible to grasp only by thought, and which it is not possible to deal with in any other way at all. Now, my friend, I said, do you see that in truth this is likely to be the subject we require? Since it evidently compels the soul to resort to reason itself for the sake of truth itself. Yes, indeed, he said, it certainly does that. Well then, have you ever considered the fact that those who take naturally to calculation are said to be bright in all subjects, while those who are dull, if they are educated and exercised in this subject, all improve and become brighter than they were before, even if they derive no other benefit? That is the way it is, he replied. And, indeed, in my view, you would not easily find many subjects which involve greater toil in learning or in practicing than this one. Indeed not. So for all these reasons, the subject must not be dismissed, and the best natures must be educated in it. I agree, he said. Then let us leave it at that and consider whether the second subject, the one that follows it, is appropriate to our purpose. What sort of subject, he asked. Do you mean geometry? The very one. Where are we at on time? Okay. The very one, I replied. Insofar as it is applicable to military affairs, it will obviously be appropriate, he said. Indeed, the man who knows geometry would be superior to one who does not in setting up camp, capturing territory, drawing the army into close formation, or dispersing it, and in any other arrangements of the army in the battle itself, or on a march. But of course, said I, that even a little geometry and calculation would be sufficient for these purposes. But we need to consider whether most of it, and the more advanced part thereof, is inclined to make the form of the good easier to discern. That is the objective. And according to us, any subject inclines to this, provided it compels the soul to turn around to that place where the most blessed part of the what is resides, a part that the soul must behold in every way. Correct, said he. And in that case, if it compels the soul to uphold being, it is an appropriate subject. But if it compels her to behold becoming, it is not appropriate. Yes, so we say. Well, said I, no one with even the slightest experience of geometry will argue with us over this proposition, that this knowledge itself stands in contrast to what is said about it in discussion by those who practice it. How so? Said he. Well, they somehow speak quite comically, and they are actually compelled to do so. In fact, by using terms like squaring and applying and extending and so on, they speak as though they are engaging in activity. And as if they are constructing arguments for some practical purpose, even though I presume the entire subject is pursued for the sake of knowledge. Yes, entirely so. Can we agree on a further point? What is it? They pursue it for the sake of knowledge of what always is, and not of what becomes something at some time and then is destroyed. That is easy to accept, said he. Geometrical knowledge is knowledge of what always is. So, my noble friend, it would be a subject that draws the soul towards truth and produces a philosophic mind, directing upwards whatever we now incorrectly direct downwards. Yes, as best it can, said he. So, said I, you must arrange, as best you can, that the people in Noble City do not refrain from geometry in any way, for even its incidental benefits are significant. What are they? He asked. Those you mentioned, said I, those concerned with warfare. And of course we know, I presume, that for any subject to be better assimilated, it generally makes all the difference whether the student has already taken to geometry or not. All the difference indeed, by Zeus, said he. So, shall we propose this as the second subject for our young folk? We should. What about this? Should we propose astronomy as a third subject? Or do you not think we should? I do indeed, he said, for being better able to discern the seasons, the months, and the years is appropriate, not only for agriculture and navigation, but also for generalship, no less. You amuse me. You seem to be afraid of what most people think of you if you prescribe in practical subjects. It is no ordinary matter. In fact, it is quite difficult to be convinced that some organ of the soul, an organ that everyone has, is purified and rekindled by these studies, having been corrupted and blinded by our other pursuits, and that it is more important to preserve this organ than it is to preserve 10,000 eyes. The truth is seen only by this. Now, those who hold these opinions already will think that what you are saying is really sound, while those with no awareness of this at all are likely to think you are talking nonsense, for they will see no other benefit worth mentioning from these. So decide, here and now, which group you are conversing with, if any. Or perhaps you are formulating the arguments mainly for your own sake, although you would not, of course, begrudge anyone who might derive some benefit from them. That is my choice, he said. I am speaking, asking questions, and answering them, mostly for my own sake. Let us fall back, then, said I, since we did not pick the subject which comes next after geometry correctly just now. How did we go wrong, he asked. After flat surfaces, I said, we took solids already in rotation, before taking solids just by themselves. The correct sequence is to take the third dimension after the second, and this is presumably the dimension associated with cubes, and whatever has depth. Okay, and so this is where we're going to break up. It's a natural stopping point. We're coming up on an hour, and we're about to get into a new subject. We could dove into the cave, and the main lesson to take from that is that you should always be learning, because even if you think that you know the truth of a matter, there is a very good chance that you do not. There is a very good chance that there is some portion of the knowledge that has been hidden from you, whether intentionally or not, and that you are missing a vital piece. The shadows you see on the wall that you think are reality may only be shadows of something passing that you cannot see. There may be a greater purpose to all of these things. And another thing, if you're brought into the light, whether forcefully or by your own volition, and you adjust to the light, it is extremely difficult to go back to the shadow. It is hard to go from reasoning and understanding and searching for the truth in the light to being surrounded by those who do not, who cannot, who are bound by their chains to stare at the wall and the shadows that are cast that are not the truth, and they don't care. Once you have been shown the truth and you do care, it is extremely difficult to be surrounded by those who don't. Seeking knowledge is a good and noble thing, and it should be done whether it hurts your feelings or not, whether it steps on your very firmly held beliefs or not, whether it coincides what you already know to be true or not. You should still seek the truth, because the truth will set you free. And that is the purpose of the allegory of the cave. Hopefully, I brought a little bit of knowledge and not too much confusion to a not too difficult topic, right? This is him bequeathing knowledge upon us. I don't have a whole lot to add to these. This is to be studied. You should definitely go back and check out David Moran's interpretation, which he has put up freely available, which is linked down below. You can see all of these writings for yourself and go through them at your leisure. Pick through the words. Really get a feel for it on your tongue. It makes a difference when you speak it out loud. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, only complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Take. Peace.